live. We've got people joining. It's very exciting.
It
Welcome, everybody.
Can you not hear me still?
Down there on the bottom, Nicole, there's those audio things that might be connected to your ear pods, is what it does to me sometimes. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking today about a couple things. We're going to start with talking about comment analysis on uh, creator content and how that can be useful. And then we're going to be talking a bit about our most recent Influencer Impact Strategist edition about why all these creators keep losing elections. So, can we hear you yet, Nicole?
Can you hear me?
I can't. Can people hear Nicole?
I love
There
technology.
you go. There you go.
Okay. All right. All right.
Welcome to the party. Um, awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Feel free to drop questions, comments, thoughts in the live chat. Yeah, so how you doing, Nicole?
I'm doing good. It's almost the end of the week. We're chugging along. All good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's been a wild week on the internet between all the World Cup excitement and the main the main disaster and it's never a dull time online. So yeah, I think, we Magda, who's our head of research, wrote a bit about how we do creator comment analysis for the newsletter. And not everybody knows, but you originally came out of our research department before you became a partner here. So
Yeah.
talk a bit about your experience with research.
Yeah. I started at People First as a social listening analyst, really trying to understand how we can see people's responses, break into conversation, really make an impact online versus just kind of like, this is the vibe that we're getting as to what could work. And a big piece of that has always been to look at the comments that we're seeing on the content. If you're only doing a couple pieces of influencer content, you're trying to impact like a small group, you may not see the broader, social listening conversation shift a lot in say like a 1 month period. So how do we actually see how the people who are viewing the content are responding to it and absorbing it? And that really comes from that comment analysis and seeing what is the recurring sentiment? How are people feeling? Are there concerns that are consistently coming up? Are there people expressing any intent? Gives you a much more clear understanding of how those who are actually engaged with your content are responding to it.
Right. And
Right.
so from a practical perspective, what we do is, the creator goes live, we let it bake a few days to get those comments in, and then we ingest all those comments to sort of understand, what they mean in practice. And one of the interesting things about this is there can be two phases to it. The first phase, you can be just looking at the creators, followers, and the people who get served the content via the algorithm. So, sort of a random assortment of people between the creators, followers, and who the algorithm thinks the content will be interesting. How are they responding?
Mhm.
But then, if you take that content and you boost it to a very specific audience, suburban women in Wisconsin, then all those comments start coming in, and you're starting to see how that target audience is actually responding to the content. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we can learn from that comment analysis?
Yeah, from the comment analysis, I mean, especially when it's really valuable to compare the organic responses versus the paid media responses to the content. Like in the organic content, those are people who follow them, like you said, who are, you know, interested in seeing that content on the algorithm. In paid, you are just putting that content directly in front of the people you're trying to reach, whether or not they explicitly are like interested in that content. And so, what we can really learn from a comparison is, what is people's sentiment? Like, are we getting a lot of positive engagement, negative engagement? Is there real concerns about anything specific? Is there intent being expressed? And it also gives you an understanding of like throughout the rest of your programming, is there a certain version of the content or storytelling that is doing really well and getting more positive and understanding engagement with it, and how can you start to tailor your messaging, your creator recruitment strategy, all those things to continue to reach people in the way that they also want to be reached and are really hearing out and being impacted by. We've seen this a lot in the work that we do around supporting LGBTQ community and specifically trans youth in organic. That content is going to be shown to those who may lean closer to understanding and being supportive of the community. But when you have that conversation in a paid media space, you really have to be strategic about how you're communicating it so that audiences who never maybe see those messages are actually receiving the communication.
Yeah, exactly. When you break out of that sort of initial bubble and you get into those more persuadable, moderate audiences that don't necessarily see a lot of the kind of content that you're showing them, I think that's where you learn a lot. And what's also cool is not just looking at the comments, but looking at the bios and who's actually commenting. Can you talk a bit
Mhm.
about that?
Yeah, yeah. So everybody who's commenting, you can also see who they are, what their demographics are, what type of content they regularly engage with. So you can see, like, oh, if we are posting this content, it is really landing with people in Wisconsin who are ages 35 to 45, who are interested in family and health and wellness. You can see if you are reaching the audience that you are actually hoping to reach and communicate with. That is the best metric that we have for organic understanding of who you're communicating with, because now we know in an algorithm era that people who follow somebody, you can get the demographics and information on the people who follow someone, but the people who follow them may not actually ever even see the content.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so to sort of sum it up, comment analysis is something that we've used here at People First for you know our entire existence, like 7 years.
From the
Uh,
beginning.
yeah, it's not anything new. It's not a new technology or anything, but I think it is a strategy that is useful, both in understanding how your content's performing, how the message is performing, and to take the information that you're learning from that analysis and apply it to your next creative brief or the next way that you sort of partner with creators. So if you're seeing a lot of people ask a very specific question or make a comment about a type of something around an issue, you can get in front of those questions and comments by being more proactive in future content. So yeah, so when you work with People First, that's something that you get, for the rap report. But if you're running a more intensive, longer campaign, we can build that into sort of the optimization cycle, of the work. Cool. Well, that actually goes into the second thing I want to talk about, which is why all these influencers keep losing elections. I wrote a piece for the Substack. I guess it was just last week now,
Mhm.
that got quite a bit of attention because we were talking about Jack, the Kennedy grandson, and his run for Congress in New York 12, and why he was looking at his profile and looking at his online attention, etc. You think, wow, this is a candidate that's going to go far. But then when the actual voting happens, he comes in a distant third place. You want to talk a little bit about sort of how we did that analysis and what we looked at?
Yeah, what we were looking to understand is who is he actually communicating with? Who is actually engaged with his content? And I think what we saw was something like only 10% of his audience was actually based in New York. Of that, it's hard to tell exactly who's based in his specific district or if it's just people across the state and across the city who are supporting him but cannot be his direct voters. Um, because you have a wider audience, you are reaching a wider demographic pool. You're going further than just your local geography. You, like, may not actually be communicating with who your voters are. You're communicating with people online who support you, like what you have to say. The algorithm is feeding your content to those types of individuals who would be interested in what you have to say.
Right. And so in this case, you've got two other candidates who are, more local. They've been local politicians for a long time. They've, done I lived in New York for many, many years, and they've done the hard work of going to every community function, every parade, and they've built like a real community following. And even if that following is 20 or 30,000 people and not a million, when it comes to a congressional race, having that local density is way more important. The algorithm is gonna show it to more local people. It's gonna get liked and engaged with by actual voters, not just fans who live in California of a candidate, and it makes a huge difference. So, if I'm a local campaign, should I be focused on the biggest creators I can find, or should I be focused on a teacher in Harlem who has 10,000 followers?
Yeah, and somebody who truly spends their time and showcases on their feed that they are connecting with people in the community. That is what continues to put the content in front of other community members. Just your platform alone is going to reach a much wider audience of supporters than how you're engaging with your local community. I mean, we saw this with Zoran, obviously coolest, most trendy, political influencer that we've seen in a while. And but I not only did I see his content, I consistently saw him everywhere that I was going. I saw him at multiple events. He was always in the neighborhood. He was doing things with the community members. Those things continue to feed the algorithm in a way that allows you to connect. Just having a lot of followers and a lot of views doesn't translate to votes.
Exactly. And we think about, when you have a large creator, they're really good at getting attention, and helping raise your name ID and getting out there, and can be valuable for a lot of campaigns. It can be valuable at different points in a political race. But when it comes down to, who's going out and actually voting, those more local voices are more impactful. And you can do things like, if you have a person who doesn't have a huge following, but they make you a great piece of content, you can take that piece of content, you can use it in an email, you can send it out as a video and a text blast you can boost it on paid media, whether that be programmatic or social. So not to think about the creator posting as sort of the end of your engagement with that piece of content, but really just the beginning. Then you take that content and you scale it to all the places that make sense. And there's some belief that I just don't think is backed up by the data, that people who follow creators have they really care what they have to say in a way that is larger than a lot of other folks. There are certainly creators who have parasocial relationships with their followers, and that can be beneficial to brands, but that's not every creator. And if you're thinking backwards, who is the right messenger to persuade the audience that I want to persuade? When we do a campaign to get sort of MAGA adjacent folks excited about renewable energy, we don't use climate focused people to talk about that. We use men who have put solar panels on their roofs to talk about how it saves them on their energy bill. So there's just different ways to approach things based on who your end audience is, who you're trying to persuade, and what creator makes the most sense for that. And it's not always the usual suspects, and it's typically not the people who are only talking about those issues.
Yeah, and I think even in our time, um, as an agency working on this sort of work, um, we have seen a lot change. When we first started, it was who is their audience? How are they engaging with their like, who is their followers and how are they engaging with their followers? And over the last few years, with the way that the algorithm is developing, and I think we first saw it with TikTok, now it's being used across every other platform. Um, you are thinking about who, like you said, about who the messenger is, not about who they regularly communicate to. So think about like what is their life experience? What is their, you know, messaging and communication that they can bring to a story, that can really make a difference. And really, I think that follower count and follower demographics are becoming less and less valuable.
Yeah, I say this all the time, but there's never been a time on social media when who you follow and the content that you see have been less connected. So I follow a lot of my friends from high school and from college and from different campaigns that I've worked on, and I don't see their content as much as I would like to. I'd like to see it a lot more, but the algorithm is feeding me content that it thinks I will like based on everything that I've interacted with. And I'm spending as much time, if not more time, with content from people that I'm not following than content from people that I'm intentionally following because I want to see what's up with their lives. In fact, it sometimes makes me think there's like a opening in the social media universe to kind of go back to, actually being able to follow your friends again. Even, and Instagram was that for a while, but then obviously the algorithm and Reels really changed all that. So um, that is just something to think about. Your people, the follower, a small percentage of followers are actually seeing the content that a creator posts. More people are seeing it outside of their follower universe just based on the algorithm.
Yeah, 100%.
And one other thing I want to talk about, I don't want to go through the whole five things that we've learned so far about the election, but I've linked it in the notes here. Folks can go take a look. But all of this also ties into clipping. Because what clipping lets you do is you can take a 2-minute video from a creator talking about, something they like about your candidate or your cause or your brand, cut that into 4 or 5 pieces, add animations, add text, captions, and then use that in paid media, use that on organic social, tag that creator as a collab. But there's a lot of ways that you get that content out there besides that 2-minute video. For instance, this conversation that you and I are having, it's going to be, 22 minutes. And, we've got some people who've joined and thank you for joining, but we don't actually do these because of the live functionality. We do these as a way to generate clippable content. Talk a little bit about how we're seeing clients do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's entirely underrated, and I haven't stopped hearing you talk about clipping every day. But clients are really utilizing this strategy to make the content last longer, go further, play against, or I guess not against, but play with the algorithm. Because like all the things that we mentioned, you're not just getting that immediate, airtime. You want to make sure that if you spend all this time finding the right creators, doing the right messaging, putting this, really carefully crafted campaign together, you want to make sure as many people see it as you possibly can. And you need to take those clips, share them with other creators, share them with pages that are, you know, I don't know why I always use this example because I love Star Wars, but it's like there are those accounts that are just reposting all the videos they ever see from other creators about Star Wars and utilizing those pages to get your messages in other places can be really beneficial.
Definitely. And, one of the offerings we have is something called a creator briefing. And that's when we get a bunch of creators into a Zoom room with a candidate or an organization. They have a conversation, they talk about all sorts of things. And at the end of that briefing, you've got these creators who are newly excited about, your calls or your candidate. And then we send out clips to all the creators who were there. And they will share those clips far and wide because one of the things creators really need is content. So providing creators with content, especially of them talking in a professional, like interesting way, they're going to share it, and you're going to be able to get a lot of attention from it. So kind of combining these online events with clipping, and then distribution, and then using paid to get make sure that some of those clips are seen, seeing what really rises to the top. Our colleague Ryan Long, Gen Z Ryan, I'm Millennial, Gen Z Ryan, he's obsessed with trial reels. So what he'll do is he'll post, a handful of trial reels, and these are reels that don't go to your followers. They don't get posted publicly, but they just go sent out into the algorithm, and he'll see what performs the best from those trial reels to actually post and then use in paid. So there's just a lot more ways now to sort of test content, and get it out there in smaller ways. And there was a study I talked about in the Month in Digital a few months ago, showing the top 20 creators on YouTube, and that the vast majority of those creators' views did not come from their tentpole YouTube content. It came from clips that were, out there in the world. I've never watched a Theo Von interview in my entire life, but I have seen Theo Von clips from random accounts. I can't get away from it. I've tried. I've said not interested, but apparently, even me engaging to not be interested is some engagement. So they show me even more Theo Von. So yeah, I think that's really something to think about. So long story short, we've talked today about the value of comment analysis with creator content, and we've talked about why these influencers keep losing elections, and we've talked about clipping. So those are three things that we've been thinking about, and encourage folks to go through and look at our Substack for more. And if you want to talk to Nicole about, set up a call to talk about your brand organization campaign, you can just go to peoplefirst.cc and make an appointment. And we thank everybody for your time this morning, and go France this afternoon.
We'll see. We'll see.
Thanks,
The
everybody.
this week's games have been just, like, not how I wanna go, so let's see France.
Viva France. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.